The clock is ticking on a real problem in this country. We have a deficit that's growing larger every year. The government's spending more, $1 trillion more than it takes in. We need to solve that problem. I'm Les Winston. How would he solve it, Peter?
Socialcharity.org.
Socialcharity.org, right. Go there and find out why it's important for you to do some planning now to figure out how to solve this problem by using charitable resources. Socialcharity.org. It's the way to go. It's the next generation Social Security. Hello and welcome to today's edition of Endow America Network. I'm your host, Les Winston, and I'm with you on a regular basis here to try and explain why we want to change the world. Interesting article in the Wall Street Journal, actually in the Wednesday, January 29th edition, where it talks about the CBO sees years of trillion-dollar deficits. This is coming out of Washington, D.C. by Richard Rubin. And it talks about the federal debt and the sustained federal budget deficits will hit the highest levels since World War II over the next decade. Government will spend $1 trillion more than it collects in 2020, and deficits will reach or exceed that threshold every year for the foreseeable future. So this is a problem that we've been talking about for a while. And actually, if you go to the website that's connected to Endow America Network, socialsecharity.org, that's socialsecharity.org, social, SECHARITY.org. If you go to that website, you'll find an animation, actually, which we created a while ago, which, interestingly enough, has Uncle Sam explaining why that $1 trillion deficit is so bad and what can be done about it. And what can be done about it is changing the way we do things in the country. The expenses that we have for social services that the government pays for that it really shouldn't be paying for are keeping us in deficit spending. And so that needs to be replaced, and that's one of the reasons why Social Secharity is so important these days. My co-host today is Peter Mendez, and Peter is the president of First SOS Staffing, which is a staffing company here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and who is intent on employing everybody that's possible to employ. Good morning, Peter. How are you?
Good morning, Les. I'm well. Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, and we're trying to get the public to be aware, and specifically not just the public at large, but also the 30 to 50-year-olds in the country who think they're paying more than their fair share of taxes and want to pay less, and who also want to convert some of that tax money to income that they can spend at a later date. I used to have a radio show called Funny Money, and that was based on the premise of changing the tax dollars into spendable dollars. And that's what people have the opportunity to do if they do it properly and within the law. They can do it by taking Social Secharity devices, things that make Social Secharity happen, and creating tax deductions and allowing themselves to have more income. But the 30 to 50-year-old, you're in that age bracket, the 30 to 50-year-old segment that's paying taxes, how does everybody feel about taxes? And people like paying the tax?
Oh, absolutely. About as much as they like to go to their proctologists or dentists.
Okay. So how do we change the thinking? How do we go about making an adjustment in the way we look at things, especially if you're between the ages of 30 and 50 and you're making a very good living, you're a professional or you're a CEO of a company and you're making a lot of money and you're paying a lot in taxes and you'd like to put more away for retirement, but you've exhausted your normal retirement funds like your IRA and your pension or profit sharing plan. Now you'd like to do more, but you don't really have an outlet. What can you do with that?
Yeah, well, there are very few options that you can do in that regard. I mean, not just my impression, but on the basis of interaction with my colleagues, the perception is that the tools to really leverage tax savings is primarily relegated to the elite, to those that have significant assets, not just high income. Mm-hmm. So to clarify my thinking, and when you say a 30 to 50-year-old or so, and high income, you're talking about people that are earning about $300,000 to $500,000.
People who are earning a lot more than they're spending,
right,
would like to put away more money than they can under qualified plans, and who want to pay less tax. I mean, if they could put it away and pay less tax at the same time, that would be a benefit, and
right,
and that's allowed.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're talking about you're a successful doctor, attorney, any professional, an engineer, a software developer, any
business
account
owner?
exec,
Business owner, small business owner.
someone along those lines. They're a software company. They're doing well, and they have access to more cash than they need to live with, and they've already optimized their contributions to their qualified plans. Right? Okay.
Correct.
And in this instance, that individual is looking to reduce the amount of taxes that they pay. I mean, let's say you have an income of $400,000 and at an average of 20%, you're going to be looking at about $80,000 or so in taxes, and you want to significantly reduce that. And
well, you also want to convert it to usable dollars. So here's what's interesting about this. It's not the cash itself. It's the fact that individuals need to know they can use non-cash assets as well to get the tax deduction to save the cash that they have that they would ordinarily give to the government. So they're turning a non-cash asset that they own now into a cash asset that they can use now. Plus, they're using the non-cash asset to build income for themselves in the future.
Okay, so give me a couple of examples of non-cash assets, say for a dentist or a small business owner or something along those lines.
Well, those two categories are generally different because a dentist is usually a professional association, would be owning a professional association, and a small business owner would have a business. In a small business, as opposed to a professional association, the small business owner could actually give an interest in his business to somebody else. But a professional can't do that. A dentist can't give an interest in his practice to a non-dentist.
Okay.
So he couldn't give it to, for example, a tax-deductible charitable trust.
Okay.
Whereas a business owner could do that with his corporate stock. But a dentist could, if a dentist is invested in the stock market on his own and he has appreciated stock, and he says, you know what, I'd like to sell this stock, I've got a lot of profit in it, but I don't want to pay all that tax, I don't need to add more tax to my tax problem, he could take that stock and donate it to a Social Security device, a Social Security trust, get a tax deduction for making the gift of that stock, sell the stock, not pay capital gains tax on the gain, and reinvest money that's inside that trust to make income in the future, and not take income now. If he wants to, he can create that kind of a mix. Now, that's always been. I think what you said earlier is very interesting. That you felt it was always for the more elite or the one percenters, and that was true until recent years. And what we're really talking about is how to do that kind of tax planning using this type of charitable device. There are a lot of people that use them for many years. I mean, when they used to talk about the estate tax and stopping the estate tax, the people that were really wealthy in this country never really paid estate tax because they always used these kinds of devices to do that. But it was always like the wealthy could afford that to find the information. Now the information is readily available. If you're listening to this program, you know that you can go to socialsecharity.org, that website, and see how Social Security can be used in your situation. And that's what we're making available to you through this Endow America network. We'd like you to be a contributor to it. If you're listening, we'd like you to contribute to the network. Go to the website and subscribe and find out how to become a contributor so you can get the information that we're sharing on a regular basis, either through podcasts or the updating of the Social Security website. The point is that you can get the information. You can see how this is done. Plus, you'll have access to professional people who are actually skilled in this particular area. It's a very unique niche. Your advisor may know how to do this or may know a little bit about this, but you can most likely use the help of a person that has more professional, specific education with regard to the Social Security devices.
Acknowledged. Okay, so in the instance of these two examples, the small business owner who has contributed or donated a small portion of his business, or the dentist who has donated some appreciated asset that he doesn't want to pay capital gains on or something along those lines.
Could be a shopping center.
Okay. Or an investment property, a small apartment that they may have had, their first apartment, right?
Could be an empty lot that he was going to build on.
Something along those lines. Well, one of the benefits is the immediate reduction in taxes. right? So they're actually monetizing that non-producing tax burden. Right? That's one. Walk me through some of the other benefits associated with that.
Well, they get the tax deduction. Let's give an example. Okay, so let's say you are a dentist and you own a piece of vacant property. The only thing that's doing for you is making you pay taxes, mow it, maintain it for whatever other reasons there may be to avoid any nuisances on it. It's an obligation, but it's not producing any income.
Okay.
And it's not even depreciable. So you've got a lot that you own and it's not doing anything for you. You'd like to sell it, but you can't find a buyer right now, maybe because the market's not there. But you want to be able to use it to benefit yourself in some way, and you can do that by gifting that lot to a charitable social security device. And that means you're giving it to a social security trust of some type. You give it to the trust, and that trust can hold it until it's ready to be sold, until you can sell it. But when you gift it, you get a tax deduction for the value of that property, appraised value of that property, based on your age and based on what kind of trust is set up to hold that. So you have an immediate cash benefit by getting a tax deduction for a gift of a property that you're really not using and that you may sell in the future. Now let's assume, for argument's sake, that all of a sudden development comes around that area. This piece of property is now owned in your Social Security trust, and that Social Security trust now has an opportunity to sell it. When it sells that property, the cash would come into that trust, and the cash from that trust would be invested by the trustee, which is generally you, the person that gifts the gift. That trustee can sell that property in the trust and not pay any capital gains on that property. Now invest the full amount to produce income to the individual for the rest of the individual's life. There are several ways that particular Social Security device can be set up that have certain advantages. For example, we want distribution of income from that trust at some point in the future, but we don't want it now because there's no income being produced. So we create a flip trust. A flip trust allows you to take the property in, not pay out income until the property gets sold, at which time it turns into what is called a standard unit trust, where you can get the income on a regular basis every year from the cash that's in there. So you have ways of planning to make an advantage even more advantageous and do more to protect it. But that's why it's important to work with somebody who has the nuances of the planning.
Right.
And that's now available to a lot more people because there are people who actually go to school for that.
Right.
And those are the chartered advisors in philanthropy.
And you can find a listing of those on socialcharity.org.
Yes, in the council. There's a council of professional philanthropic advisors that's part of that socialcharity.org website.
Okay, fair enough. So then, so far I see two advantages, right? You get an immediate deduction or a reduction in your taxes. So you
get a tax deduction that you can use to eliminate tax.
That's one.
Yeah. And by the way, if you have a bigger tax deduction than you can use in the first year, you can generally carry it forward for 5 years.
Okay, excellent. That's good to know. Then, secondly, you develop an income stream for when you're ready for retirement or some point in the future that you determine that you want to receive an income stream from. So you monetize that non-cash asset in that way as well.
Yes,
right?
You can use the trust device to purchase investments that don't throw off income now, but that can accumulate and grow in order to throw off a greater amount of income in the future.
Understood. Okay. I imagine that there would be some adverse tax consequence if this were the case. But the trust that is established, is that revocable? For example, in the instance that you brought up, where you have a vacant lot, but then development takes place thereafter, after you've made the contribution, and the value of that lot significantly increases, and you get the opportunity to either sell it or develop it yourself. Are you able to revoke that trust, take back that property?
No, but you can do it inside the property. If you're the trustee of the trust, you're going to do whatever you want to do with that property, as long as you're not doing something that's not allowed, which would be to take the property back and sell it and take the money for it. You can operate within the confines of the trust requirements. So the trust as the trustee of the trust, you would have all of the normal powers granted to the owner of the property because the trust is the owner.
So you, in essence, would gain all of the benefits from that boon, essentially by amplifying the sale amount or the income that you can generate in the future.
Let's say you give it to the trust. Let's say the property is worth $300,000 when you gift it to the trust, and assuming that you're, let's say, 45 or 50 years old, you're going to get a smaller tax deduction because you're entitled to income in the future. So you'll probably get about a 35% tax deduction, not for the full amount. So you get that tax deduction on that $300,000 piece of property. Now it's in the trust. Each year you're going to have to pay the tax on that. Those taxes will have to be paid. You'll have to pay maintenance on it out of the trust. Okay, you may have to make additional contributions to the trust to pay that, but that's what you would have to do anyway. Those would be tax deductible at that point when you put them into the trust to pay those expenses. So now you've had it for, let's say, 8 years. In the 8 years, through development around it, it's appreciated now to $1 million. Okay, when you sell it, the full $1 million comes into the trust. And if you want to use that to invest in anything else, it's available. Let's assume that you wanted to develop the property yourself and then sell it. You could do that. But you'd have to have the funds available inside the trust or have a joint venture between the trust and the developer to do that.
Understood.
But you can do it.
Okay, which is great because you essentially get almost all the use of the asset without while still capitalizing on all of the benefits of a semi-qualified plan.
Well, remember that what you basically would do any of that for if you were holding the property outside of the trust would be to make income. Generally, that's what most people want is income.
Right.
So if you can make that property worth a lot more to generate a lot more income, you benefit.
Okay.
You get. Let's say you set it up as an 8% trust, an 8%. When you have a term in there that says, if I sell this property, I will get. At that point, this will flip to an 8% per year trust, meaning that I will get 8% of the value of what is in this trust based on December 31st of each year. I will get that the next year for the rest of my life. So if you make that trust worth $1 million at that point, where you would put in $300,000 worth of land, you're not getting $80,000 a year from that $1 million.
Tax-free.
No. That would be great if you could get it tax-free. You're going to get it as you earned it. So if it's a capital gain, you're going to get paid as capital gains. If the investment in the trust is regular income, you're going to take it as regular income.
Understood. Okay. So there are those two terrific benefits, right? A reduction.
Let me interrupt you one second. There is a way to get tax-free income out of the trust because it's a question of how the income comes in.
Oh, pray tell.
Yes. If you're using tax-free bonds as a way to get income, municipal bonds, then that money would come to you tax-free. If the money is creating long-term capital gains, and that's what's coming out of the trust, then you would pay it as long-term capital.
I'm beginning to see that there are potentially a lot of nuances here, which is the reason for which you're going to want a CAP or a CFP.
Exactly.
All right. What other benefit is there to something like this? I mean, you made reference to a community contribution.
Well, at the end of the day, if you look at the result of what happens to that property, at the end of the day, that property would then go to charitable use, meaning that it would go to a charity use that you choose as the original donor. Remember, in the beginning, you got a tax deduction for making a charitable gift. You didn't get a full tax deduction because you were entitled to income for as long as you lived. So obviously, the age at which you make the contribution, the amount of money that you're going to take from this trust, because it can vary. You can go from 0 to 15 or 20% if you want to. It depends on what the circumstances are. But you can get a fairly high percentage of income out of these trusts if it's necessary in the design, if it's appropriate. So you've gotten tax savings. You're building inside a tax avoidance trust. At the end of the day, it's not in your estate, so there's no estate tax to pay. So you've avoided some income tax, you've avoided capital gains tax, and this is not in your estate. So the complaint generally at that point is from your kids who say, what did you do? You gave away everything to charity. And that's where planning comes in. That's why you need to work with a person that understands how to do this type of planning. the other rationale for it. Besides the number of devices, it needs to be able to be fit. So you need to know what the situation is of the person that wants it done, who wants to use Social Secharity. We need to know what their needs are. We need to know what their situation is, and then we can advise them what to do properly, and use all of the different nuanced kinds of planning arrangements.
Okay. Well, give me a couple of examples of charitable initiatives that you would select.
Well, you need to think about your history. Is there something in your past that you want to support? You're talking about from a philanthropic perspective?
Correct.
Yeah, that's something that is a focusing task that the good advisor can help you to focus on, to try and find the things that you care about and help you, by asking questions and by delving a little bit more into the.
So it can be anything that you feel you want to make a positive contribution to, whether that be improvement of your local schools or improvement of the climate, making a contribution toward reducing impact to climate change, or anything that you're moved by.
Right. Well, for example, one of the initiatives that we've supported recently with one of our Social Secharity users was Safe Schools, Great Schools, where they're interested in making the school system in South Florida better for the students that go to a particular school. And they do that by creating an endowment. They want to help to create an endowment. So that endowment gets created after after this individual has used his endowment, which is his income for life. He will then leave that behind to endow a school that he cares about here locally in South Florida.
I see.
And so that's up to each individual. We think overall that Social Secharity can be used to help all the schools in the state of Florida, make it better for the citizens in the state of Florida, for the youngsters that are going to school, make sure they're safer and greater than they've been.
I see.
And not have to use tax dollars only to do that.
Okay. So 100 years from the point at which you've made the initial contribution, when you finally bite the dust, what the proceeds of that initial contribution then go towards the
let's go back to our friend the dentist.
Yeah.
The young dentist who's 50 years old, and he's gifted this vacant lot to a Social Secharity trust, and he sold the lot, and the lot was producing. It was worth $1 million when he sold it, and it was invested and it grew, and also was able to give him out 7%. And now he dies, and that's when this trust would mature for the charitable beneficiary that he chose. So let's assume he chose as a charitable beneficiary Safe Schools, Great Schools endowment fund for his high school. At that point, that money that was in the trust, the balance that was in the trust, let's say it's up to $1.2 million at that point, that becomes a gift now to the endowment. Now that makes endowment a lot easier. Endowment has been an issue with a lot of nonprofits, or it is always an issue with nonprofits, because if a nonprofit had their preference, if you were to ask any charitable board what they would like to have for their charity, is that they would like to have an endowment that would support the charity forever, and they would not have to raise any money, because raising money is always an issue with nonprofit organizations. So by endowing it, we create a continuing income stream. We can create a continuous source of revenue to support the nonprofit. So at the end of the day, here's another major purpose. First purpose that we were working on was we have a piece of vacant property, wasn't producing anything. Now we're going to turn it to cash, some cash, by getting a tax deduction for making it as a gift to a trust that we will control as trustee going into the future. When I'm ready, I want to take income from this, as much income as I can get from this trust for the rest of my life. And then when I die, whatever's left, I want it to be my legacy to my school that I care about. That's the
and the advantage to the entity to which you have made this contribution is that instead of their getting a one-time contribution, they have an endowment of residual income. So what has happened is that 8% residual income that was going to the dentist is now going to that organization.
Not the income, but the funds that were transferred to their endowment would now be invested. And if investment returns more than 8% or less than 8%, they don't get fixed 8%. They can set it up to take a certain amount each year from it, but they would have a board that would determine how much they're going to take as income from the endowment. The idea, though, is to not try and touch principal.
Understood. So the trusteeship transfers to them.
Correct. The trust now has matured because of the death of the income beneficiary, and now the trust will transfer that money to the charitable beneficiary. And this is all in a Social Security trust device.
Understood.
And it's available to everybody. It's part of the tax code. It was Section 664. In fact, we'd like you to take, if you've got nothing else, you need to get these terms down. That Section 664 is a part of the tax code which allows you to use Social Security devices. You need to understand that you can do that. We invite you to come to the socialsecharity.org website.
And this is all outlined.
It's all outlined. And everything that you possibly wanted to know about Social Security is on that website.
Outstanding.
Yeah, we want you to get there and then become a contributor to the Endow America network so we can spread this word.
Outstanding.
And we can change things. And this all started with $1 trillion deficit. Remember, folks, we want to end it up. And listen again or go to the podcasts. Thank you for joining us. The clock is ticking. We need to do something about the deficit. This is the Endow America Network. We want you to join, become a contributor, learn how to use Social Secharity. Go to the website, socialsecharity.org. It's going to help to solve the problem that we have with regard to government overspending. It'll also solve community problems. I'm Les Winston. Peter, how do you like this process?
It's everything that Social Security should have been and is not.
This is the next generation's Social Security. Go to the website, socialsecharity.org.